A face-to-face meeting between Zelenskyy and Putin. The Ukrainian leader's plane is making an emergency departure. Everything will be decided in Istanbul. Is the end of the war really near? Erdogan has made an urgent statement that is truly shocking. Meanwhile, the Kremlin has surprised everyone with its conditions for peace. Is it true that Trump and other world leaders are ready to accept these outrageous ultimatums and give in to Russia? Is Ukraine really being asked to surrender? Let's go through everything step by step. In light of recent events, Western publications have analyzed Putin's latest statement. After all, just the other day he reiterated his demands regarding negotiations which, I quote, should be based on eliminating the root causes of the conflict. It is noted that in practice this wording means a change of government in Ukraine, a legal renunciation of joining NATO, and territorial concessions. Analysts point out that such demands likely imply Ukraine giving up Crimea and 4 other regions even though Russian forces do not control them. As U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance said, Moscow wants to obtain territories it hasn't even conquered yet. So far, there are no signs that the Kremlin is ready to change its position. Earlier, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy stated that he would personally wait for the Russian dictator in Turkey on Thursday, May 15th. He added, Ukraine is waiting for a ceasefire, complete and lasting, to provide the necessary foundation for diplomacy. There is no point in prolonging the killing. The president also added that he hopes this time the Russians will not look for reasons why they cannot do it. But let's rewind a bit. What preceded this statement? Instead of a truce, new negotiations. Probably no one is surprised anymore that Putin did not announce anything sensational in his urgent nighttime address, which had been so pompously announced. Literally,
don't go to bed. Putin's statements will blow up American evening prime time. Kremlin pool journalists.
Moscow responded to Ukraine's proposal to declare a new unconditional 30-day truce with an effective refusal. In addition, Putin also accused Kyiv of allegedly violating the ceasefire during all the truces previously initiated by the Kremlin, the energy truce in March-April, the Easter truce in April, and the 3-day truce on May 9th.
Thus, the Kyiv regime demonstratively violated the 30-day, and I want to emphasize this, the 30-day moratorium on strikes against energy facilities about 130 times from March 18th to April 17th. This moratorium was declared in accordance with the agreement between our president and the President of the United States of America, Donald Trump. The Easter truce, initiated by Russia, was also not observed. The ceasefire regime was violated by Ukrainian forces almost 5,000 times.
Ukraine has repeatedly rejected these accusations and stated that it is actually Moscow that is violating the ceasefire. And the topic of the alleged truce violations on May 9th apparently struck a nerve with the Russian dictator. After all, to quote, Russia has 27 million losses, a holy holiday. Yes, Putin actually called such a horrific number of casualties a holiday.
At the Victory Day celebration, and we also consider this a sacred holiday for us, just imagine 27 million losses we have suffered. So here's the thing. On this holy day for us, we declared a truce for the 3rd time.
Putin also suggested discussing, among other things, the issue of a truce in direct negotiations between Moscow and Kiev, which, according to him, could take place as early as May 15th in Istanbul. And Moscow is ready to participate in them without any preconditions. However, Putin's proposal is essentially a return to the format and the and process that ended, without results in 2022.
There are active hostilities going on right now. It's a war. And we are proposing to resume the negotiations that were not interrupted by us.
So what's so bad about that?
He also recalled that, in Moscow's view, a ceasefire should also prevent Kyiv from rearming, training its military, and so on. He first made these conditions public back in March, when he commented on Moscow's stance regarding a potential ceasefire. Ukraine and its Western allies have called these demands unacceptable, since in that case, Kyiv would be left defenseless. The proposal to declare a complete and unconditional ceasefire for 30 days starting May 12th was made yesterday in Kyiv, following the summit of the Coalition of the Willing, and a joint call by the leaders of France, the United Kingdom, Poland, and Ukraine to Donald Trump. The President of the United States also supported the joint decision to demand that Moscow declare a ceasefire. Macron, for his part, promised that if Moscow does not agree, Europe and the United States are prepared to impose new sanctions against it. Meanwhile, Western publications write, the Russian dictator's proposal for direct negotiations with Ukraine in Istanbul is likely his last attempt to avoid fulfilling the obligations of a 30-day ceasefire. It is noted that the preparations for addressing journalists were unusual, and the announcement itself appeared to be hastily put together in a hallway. According to journalists, the statement from the coalition of the Resolute changed Moscow's agenda. Initially, it was intended as a summary of the bilateral meetings that Putin held this week with the leaders of countries, who came to celebrate Victory Day. But the ultimatum from Europe seems to have caught the Kremlin off guard. Western analysts note that although the Kremlin called Putin's statement important, its content is almost identical to Moscow's previous statements. Only the date was changed. Yes, the dictator proposed to hold direct negotiations in Istanbul. However, as the publication notes, the question arises whether Turkey was aware of this, since at that moment Putin had only promised to call President Recep Tayyip Erdogan the next day. And every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism, and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine today. Join us now. The next day, the calls did indeed take place. Turkey stated that it is ready to host potential peace talks between Ukraine and Russia. Thus, Erdogan spoke by phone with his French counterpart Emmanuel Macron. They discussed bilateral relations as well as regional and global issues. President Erdogan stated that a historic turning point has been reached on the path to ending the war between Ukraine and Russia, that this opportunity should be seized again, and that Turkey is ready to do everything possible, including hosting negotiations, to ensure a ceasefire and lasting peace. After his conversation with Macron, Erdogan also spoke with the Russian leader Putin. He confirmed his readiness to resume peace talks between Russia and Ukraine. However, the Turkish leader's view of the situation does not seem to align with Putin's opinion. Here, Erdogan agreed with Europe, saying that first there should be a ceasefire and then negotiations. Earlier, Turkish Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan assured that his country is also ready to take on the responsibility of monitoring a potential ceasefire regime in Ukraine. The president of Ukraine also responded to such statements from Putin. Volodymyr Zelenskyy emphasized that Ukraine insists on the necessity of a ceasefire as a condition for starting negotiations.
It is a good sign that the Russians have finally started thinking about ending the war. The whole world has been waiting for this for a very long time. And the very first step toward truly ending any war is a ceasefire. There is no point in continuing the killing even for a single day. We are waiting for Russia to confirm the ceasefire, a complete, lasting and reliable one. Starting tomorrow, May 12th, and Ukraine is ready to meet.
Later, the United States also responded to all this nonsense from Putin. Thus, Trump's special representative, Keith Kellogg, stated that there must first be an unconditional 30-day ceasefire, after which it will be possible to move on to peace negotiations. Kellogg also commented on social media about the New Zealand Prime Minister's statement that peace in Ukraine should begin with a 30-day ceasefire.
Even the Prime Minister of New Zealand understands this. As President Trump has repeatedly said, stop the killing. First, an unconditional 30-day ceasefire, and during that time, move toward comprehensive peace negotiations, not the other way around.
As for Trump himself, in his usual manner, he stated that this is potentially a great day for Russia and Ukraine and expressed hope that the war will finally end. He also emphasized that he will continue to work with both sides to achieve a result.
Think about the hundreds of thousands of lives that will be saved when this endless bloody carnage hopefully comes to an end. It will be a completely new and much better world. The US wants to focus on restoring trade. A big week lies ahead.
The president of France called the Russian dictator's proposal for direct negotiations a first step, but emphasized that it is not enough. According to him, an unconditional ceasefire by definition does not provide for negotiations. He said that this counter-proposal demonstrated that Putin is looking for ways forward, but still wants to buy time. German Chancellor Friedrich Merz also believes that a ceasefire in Ukraine should be a condition for negotiations between both sides. First, the weapons must fall silent, and then negotiations can begin. But it's not just about Putin. The strange statements in Russia did not end there. Dmitry Medvedev once again delivered an offensive tirade. In his now characteristic aggressive style, he naturally rejected the idea of a 30-day truce.
Macron, Merz, Trump, and Tusk were supposed to discuss peace in Kyiv. Instead, they showered Russia with threats. Either a truce to give the Banderite hordes a break or new sanctions. Do you think that's reasonable? Shove those peace plans up your pangender asses.
And Vladimir Putin's press secretary, Dmitry Peskov, stated that it is absurd to try to intimidate Russia with sanctions, and that a truce is only possible if arms supplies to Ukraine are halted. Essentially, Moscow is demanding that Kyiv be stripped of its ability to defend itself. Later, Peskov said that pressuring Russia on the issue of the Ukrainian settlement is pointless. Moscow has its own position regarding a ceasefire. And that's not all. According to Peskov, Zelensky's allegedly provocative statements ahead of May 9th border on madness. These remarks can be regarded as an act of state terrorism. And later, Trump made another statement. He called on Ukraine to immediately agree to negotiations with Russia in Turkey, saying this is a chance to see whether reaching an agreement is even possible. According to Trump, the Russian dictator Vladimir Putin does not want peace, but Ukraine should agree to negotiations anyway.
Russian President Putin does not want to sign a ceasefire agreement with Ukraine, but he is seeking to meet in Turkey on Thursday to discuss a possible end to the bloodshed. Ukraine must agree to this immediately.
So the circle is complete. We have returned to Zelensky's initial statement. It was in response to this jab from Trump that the Ukrainian leader said he was personally waiting for Putin in Istanbul. Fearing to appear as an obstacle to peace in Trump's eyes, Zelensky quickly changed his rhetoric. This could be a strategic move. On the one hand, to maintain Trump's support, and on the other, to put Putin in an awkward position if he refuses to engage in dialogue. In other words, we can observe a certain pattern, a constant raising of the stakes. Zelensky, together with European leaders, emphasized that they want a 30-day ceasefire. In response, Putin demanded negotiations in Istanbul. Ukraine agreed to negotiations, but only after a ceasefire. It seems as if Trump switched his focus from Moscow back to Kyiv and started putting pressure on Zelensky. And in response, Zelensky raised the stakes to the maximum by agreeing to a personal meeting with Putin. What happens next? That question remains open. But it's worth noting that China has also become involved in all these negotiation processes. Let's recall that on May 9th, Moscow held its victory parade of triumphalism. And it was for this occasion that Xi Jinping flew to Moscow, where he met with the Russian dictator. As Xi stated, China hopes for a just, lasting, and binding peace agreement that will be accepted by all interested parties and achieved through dialogue. At the same time, the Chinese leader did not specify what he means by a just agreement. His statement marked the first time that the Chinese leader personally presented China's vision for ending the war in Ukraine. And what do you think about the latest events in the world? Share your opinion in the comments.